はい、聞こえますか？ ?Okay, thank you. さてと、よし。Thank you, Chair. On the opening government, there are going to be two pieces of setup. Firstly, we're going to clarify that we're going to take the heavy burden of proving actually that this is actually the greatest obstacle to women to succeed. By greatest, we mean that it harms the most vulnerable, it blocks material progresses, it blocks meaningful progresses for women's rights, as well as becoming dominant and clouds out any other voices. We think that feminism and women's rights movement is very nuanced and diverse. And I think it is important that we do actually reach that diverse needs. But then when we have this protectionist policy amongst men especially, we think that this actually blocks progresses, and that is bad. Secondly, I think the motion slides specifically tells us that these kind of benevolent feminisms or policies are actually harmful to the people. We think that this is something that you shouldn't really dispute in this debate, but if our opposition does so, we're happy to dispute that as well. Now, I'm going to talk about three things in my speech. Firstly, about how this actually blocks progresses in multiple ways. Secondly, why we think this voice is like this kind of policy is like to be dominant and therefore it's bad. And lastly, I'm going to tell you why we think this is greatest in many aspects. Firstly, about blocking of progresses. Now, firstly, what we notice in this debate is that when you have this benevolent sexism, it's nuanced up and backed up with ideas of protection. What does that mean? It means that it has nuances behind it, that it involving men being the protector and women becoming the recipient of that protection. So what does that mean? We think that it firstly has a connotation and a nuance that men who are in the role of protection are the ones who should be discussing what is necessary to be done in society in order to protect these people. This actually significantly excludes women from the participating in the discussion in the first place. Moreover, we think that protection means that it is the only people who should participate in the discussion should be limited to those people who can offer the protection. Who is it likely to be in the mindset of men? It is likely to be the powerful men, not necessarily weak men. So men who are not necessarily economically very viable, or people who are from minority backgrounds are likely to be excluded from the discussion, provided that these people are weak and they are not necessarily the targets of being the provider of this protection. They are probably also weak people who should be protected alongside with women as well. So what that means is that it is likely to be ending up in situations where women and weak men are not necessarily involved or actively invited into discussions. This already happens in corporate discussions, in companies where even in like the benevolent big companies who have the resources to protect women and to make sure that women have rooms of advancing through the corporate ladder, it means that women's voice and like weak men's voices are only heard as a reference. But all the discussion in terms of what kind of policies the company should be taking in order to make sure that women have a better role in the companies are dominated by men, because they think that women are the ones who we should actively protect as powerful men in the company. What does it mean? It actually doesn't really necessarily cater, in the results, doesn't necessarily cater to the real needs of these women that are actually needing the protection. For example, in companies, we think that a lot of people may want like more leaves for like their monthly periods, but we think that men who can't necessarily have that real life experience are likely to misrepresent the diversity of the necessary need to rest in kind of these periods, and they set blanket standards like only allowing you to take a day off, or like what a day off, even though sometimes it's heavier for some people. I'll take you in a second, closing opposition. But secondly, in terms of society, I think it is likely to define social society. When we talk about like social progresses in general and protection of like women's economic status, we think that discussion is likely to be tilted towards providing economic opportunities to women, not necessarily on the diverse nuances of diverse things that women need on the ground, including the poor people. Why is it? It's because men who are powerful are living in this narrative of defining economic success, being a CEO of some big company as a sole form of success, because they are in that culture and because they're raised up in that kind of situation. And we think this is harmful. Secondly, we think that this narrative is harmful because the capacity of installing changes in society is likely to be limited to men's capacity. So what that means is that even if a lot of women and men complain and say that there are certain needs and policies that need to be taken, it is only conducted when men feel the need to do so. Why is it harmful? For example, in cases of the economic depression, like in the COVID, what happened was the weakest women, like single mothers, were the ones who were struck most, and they needed to be they needed a protection. But when men who are protectors think that it is important that protectors should be protected first in order to make sure that these economic benefits can be transferred to the women later on, they prioritize things like growth and keeping jobs and keeping bonuses of big CEOs and these kind of things. So that shows that the real help is less likely to go into to ground when these kind of things happen. And this is actually bad. I'll take the closing opposition now.
Yeah, majority of contemporary business understand the importance of diversity in their organization. Therefore, many businessmen try to respect the diversity and allows women to voice up in the corporation.
You need to tell us why that is not superficial, given that these people do come from a background that I have explained. Secondly, about check and balances. These voices are likely to be very, very dominant. Firstly, we think that check and balance doesn't work because men, even for the mildest conservative men who are the majority likely in society, are easy to opt into this voice and stick to it. Firstly, we think that men are not demonized, unlike other forms of feminist voices saying that men are the enemy of us. So what that means is that this protectionist thing tickles their ego and actually provokes more engagement into the discussion for men, meaning that the only voices that have been heard actively are likely to be from the perspective of protectionism. Secondly, women cannot necessarily actively criticize men for being protectionist. Why? It's because it is hard to criticize somebody who's acting on a goodwill, because even it looks like your angry mother. It reminds you of their angry mother, meaning that men might actually think that, oh, I'm doing something good, but I'm still being scolded. Why should I protect women? Because they're not wanting that protection. Women fear this kind of scenario and are actively not necessarily criticizing men to make sure that there are diverse views being represented. Why do we think this is the greatest problem? We think that we told you already that the most vulnerable are being struck, especially in the example of the economic crisis. But secondly, we think that there are limited change. I think in the end, feminism seek to actually install material changes, and this is the only limited when men actually see the opportunity in protecting. Lastly, we think that I have no time, so I'm going to stick quick now. But we think for all these reasons, this is a very great obstacle, and we have to revoke it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. Let's invite Leader of Opposition.
Hey, am I audible? Okay. If you have POI, please say in chat or voice out, and I might take your POI. So I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So first 3 responses to OG, and next moving on to explain what kind of other factors like hindering female success exist in society, and finally I'd like to explain why these factors are greater than the benevolent sexism, which proves that benevolent sexism is not the greatest factor. So first, about the response. So they explained that under this benevolent sexism, male tend to think that they must protect the women, and in that case, the women tend to be out of the meetings in creating the systems or to protect these women and so on. However, we believe that this is unlikely to happen because in order to protect the women, it is obvious that we need to know what they actually need, and in order for that to happen, we believe that women need to be in the place of this discussion because the systems for them would not be accurate, such as the degree of the period or the necessary time needed for the leave during this or such kind of care can only be known by the female who actually experience these kinds of things. So we believe that it's likely that they would be included in the place of discussion. And secondly is that we believe that there are other factors that lead to female being less less present in these kinds of like higher positions or in these kinds of meetings because of like systematic reasons or more active sexism in the first place, which I'll like to explain later in my speech. And we believe side OG has a BOP where they didn't show like the comparative in terms of like when this like benevolent sexism is cleared out as the greatest factor. We believe there's no reference to other kinds of like the sexual norms or the other systematic factors and so on. So we believe that this BOP still remains. So next, moving on to our arguments. So firstly, yes, we believe the women's success like means like to be like financially independent or to maybe gain a good social economic position and so on. So next, secondly, what kind of other factors exist that like hinder the success of of women? A is we believe there are like systematic factors, such as like the lack of like female quota systems or the lack of like or the lack of childcare leaves or the leaves when like women experience like periods and so on. And B is that like non-benevolent sexism, so more active kind of sexism, such as like the bias that women are inferior to men and so on. We believe these kinds of like women aren't like competent enough to get to a high position. We believe these kinds of like active forms of sexism exist. For example, like students who pass the entrance examinations for like prestigious universities such as like Todai and so on are likely from like boy only school, and in that case like there are still many people who believe that like men are superior than women in terms of like intellect and so on. So we believe this kind of active sexism exists as a factor. And that being said, next moving on to like why these factors are like much greater than the benevolent form of sexism. So as for like the system, we believe like the degree of like sexism or the degree of bias towards gender like varies greatly by each individual. However, like the lack of system or these like structural factors are something that apply to all the whole society or the whole like female population. For example, we believe when like female quotas are introduced or like a childcare leave, a sufficient childcare leave or leave when female experience like period is introduced, this has effect towards all kinds of female. And when like this the obstacle here is cleared, we believe that there's a great progress in the women's success. For example, with like female quotas, there might be more female people who are in high positions in like large companies and so on, which could lead to like better like policies for the female, and also like more like better systems such as like the childcare leave or the like a leave when female experience period. As a result, like the female can like keep working effectively at companies, like they don't have to completely quit their job to raise a child and so on. And as a result, they may be more well evaluated and may have a better chance of like promotion and so on. So we believe like these systematic or structural factors are much larger. And also even within like the perspective of sexism, we believe that active sexism is more harmful than the benevolent form of sexism, because we believe the idea that like female are inferior to men, this kind of active sexism leads to women having a disadvantage in like job hunting. For example, like when entering large companies, they might be have a disadvantage. They might be less accepted compared to like same competent men, because like the people who like do the accepting process have like the bias, and also like because of this bias, like a female may be evaluated lower compared to men, which may hinder their promotion and so on. However, on the other hand, we believe benevolent sexism still has some sort of advantage, like the idea that male have to protect women lead to at least some kind of help towards women when they are in trouble and so on. So we believe the active sexism is much more harmful. Therefore, we believe since there are like other factors that are much of a bigger obstacle towards women's success, in other words, when these like other factors are overcome, it leads to greater gender equality or greater success of female. We believe the benevolent sexism is by no means the greatest factor, which is why we're happy to oppose. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Leader of Opposition, for that speech. Just for engagement purposes, please make sure that, if possible, to take POI engagements as much as possible. Okay, thank you. So let's invite DPM.
am I audible?
はい、聞こえてます。
Thanks so much. Okay. いきます。Okay, thank you, Chair. This benevolent sexism is like poison, gradually ingrain very bad idea to the women and unable for them to voice out actually and legitimize that sexism. That is very bad, and that is a premise of other existence of no absence of like system to support quota system or whatever, or like other active discriminations. Therefore, we say this is greatest obstacle. Three things to say. First of all, as refutation, we say the alternative they have said is not so greatest harm to the women. Secondly, we say check and balance system to the benevolent sexism are uniquely does not work. Thirdly, I will explain why this is greatest harm towards those kind of women. I will explain one by one. First of all, refutation. They said, first of all, like active sexism is much more harmful. Two responses. First of all, in terms of active sexism, it's like, oh, women is like machine to produce baby, like women are inferior, such kind of very active remark is likely to be checked and balanced because people can easily recognize this is the very bad remark, which is against the principle of fairness and the Western idea is prevailing in many society, even in Japan. In that kind of situation, people can recognize this as bad things. Therefore, many people will have backlash towards such evil remark. Therefore, such kind of remark will be ridiculed. That is not so problematic. Secondly, even if such voices is reach to the women, women don't take it seriously. They will think that, oh, just very, very conservative bad men is going all very bad things to us. They are not rational. In that kind of situation, there are many supporters for the recipient of such kind of active sexism. They don't treat this as the greatest damages. Therefore, their argument about active sexism does not make sense. Secondly, they talked about like absence of system like quota is very problematic. I have two responses. First of all, premise of that inability of a system is the existence of benevolent sexism. By the benevolent sexism, people are brainwashed that, oh, women don't have to work because men will earn for the women. Women don't have to fight for because men will fight for the women. In this kind of situation, gradually, like poison that will like increase, create political discourse that, oh, we don't have to use quota because women can do house things or whatever. In this kind of situation, absence of such kind of system exists. We say just like this, like benevolent sexism is very, very bad, and other system or those kind of things is not so harmful. Okay, ぽい今あります？クロージング。ないか。じゃあ、not yet. Okay. Then let's move on to my argument. I have already told you how check and balance of the other active sexism or those kind of things work. Conversely, we say check and balance system to the benevolent sexism are less likely to work. Broadly, I have two reasons. First of all, perpetrator of benevolent sexism, that is to say, men, are likely to accept this idea without bad intention. Three reasons. Partly because society recognizes as good things, and the info slide says this is subjectively good things. In that kind of situation, there's no resistance mind in your mind. Secondly, because in the conservative society or like a mildly conservative society, media narrative is created by the people in power, that is men. In that kind of situation, they are going to glorify this kind of benevolent sexism, for example, or men are successfully protected women in some area, soldier is protecting women in the vulnerable. In that kind of situation, that kind of glorification will be dominant and that will be accepted by many people. Thirdly, because even neutral or mildly conservative people or children, those people will accept those kind of idea gradually, because the people, parents, education, media, likely to tell messages with glorification, and they, without no bad intention, they will think, oh, it is good things to protect the girl. It is good things for me to earn more than a girl. Those kind of things. Those kind of perception was created. Therefore, this, in terms of this benevolent sexism, the other check and balance system will not work. The second reason is that recipient of benevolent sexism, that is to say, women cannot deny this benevolent sexism, and that is very harmful. Two reasons. Firstly, because in many cases, the women blindly believe this is good things. Because as I said, this is glorified in the society, they will accept those kind of things. Not yet. Secondly, even if people believe this is strange, oh, benevolent sexism is strange, I want to behave a strong way, but the voicing out is extremely difficult for two reasons. Firstly, because they assume good intention of the other side, right? They want to do good things for me, they want to protect me, there's no bad intention. In that kind of situation, there is a resistance in your mind. If I say this, I will feel sorry and such kind of things. In that kind of situation, it's extremely difficult for the girl or the woman to deny this kind of benevolent sexism. Secondly, because they can assume backlash. If you do say so, the other side, the perpetrator might think so, oh, I'm doing this for you, but you deny this, why you are so mean people. The woman can assume this kind of things in your mind. In that kind of situation, it will be difficult for you to voice out, I want to behave in the strong way, I want to be the business person, such kind of things. Therefore, this is very bad. Point, Aru?
Yeah, let's
okay.
see comparative. Comparative is active sexism. In those instances, women are more likely to have trauma, which incapacitates them from taking further actions.
This is not so comparative version, right? The greatest is about, I'm already talking that how this is great. Lastly, I will talk about why this is great influence to the women's success. Many reasons. Firstly, because as I said in the reflections, this is the premise of active sexism or absence of the quota system, that kind of things. Because people recognize it's not necessary for the women to be independent or make money. Therefore, there's no less support for those kind of individuals. Therefore, this is very greatest. Secondly, because this will make women far from definition of success in society, because society's definition of success are likely to be created by the men, and the men think that economical success or independency is going to be very important. In that kind of situation, if you as a wife choose a girl, oh, I can be protected by men, therefore I choose to become housewife, but society will tell you that economical prosperity is very important. You are just depending on the man. In that kind of situation, once you have already decided to become housewife, still you will be stigmatized. You will feel that, oh, though I am depending on the man, therefore, even if I think, oh, DV is very problematic, I want to opt out, but I'm economically dependent on that kind of man, therefore I cannot opt out. These kind of things will happen when benevolent sexism is very rampant. In that kind of situation, this will traumatize women and make women far from that kind of definition of success in the society. Therefore, we say this is very obstacle in the society, obstacle of the success of the women. We fulfill pardon of proof. Thus, we win this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for that speech. Let's invite DLO.
Am I audible and visible?
Yep.
Thank you. I'd like to start あ、もう、ちょっとこれ、いや、普通に。はい。I'd like to, POI on chat, please. I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Selecting my speech. First, I confirm, clarify the burden proof that what each side have to prove. So secondly, I like to talk about, provide the two responses to their side of the house. Lastly, I like to provide this new argument, which is even if we admit that this kind of sexism is really prevalent and really strong, I think this is much more better, much more helpful for women to succeed. First part of my speech, the burden proof. What they have to prove is, and they never told us, is comparative. The burdens they have to show, this is a great obstacle. Without this obstacle, women can succeed. And to say so, you have to talk about the counter. What is a counter narrative without this narrative? How men perceive how average men perceive women as a whole. I think this kind of analysis is completely lacking in the outside of the whole. After the full explanation of this analysis, you can finally prove this is a great obstacle, but they didn't talk about the comparative. The comparative in outside of the house, what is the burden from the opposition? Two burden. The first is other factor exists, which is pretty strong. The secondly, this factor, this benevolent sexism is not obstacle, but rather the good thing for women to succeed. I want to on the first speaker, we prove the first burden, but on the second my speech, to talk about why this is more rather helpful, not the obstacle. So second part of my speech is the responses. I have the two points to response to the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. On the first point, I think the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister talking about, hey, this is a benevolent, so people have the perception of this advice is really good thing, so you cannot reject the people's good attitude, etc. I think this is completely not true. There are two responses under this. The first is women can reject the benevolent sexism. As the Prime Minister told us, there are so much variety of needs in the as a whole. Things like that there are some strong women as a whole, or therefore not that moderate women as a whole. Which means the typical intuition pan is that hey, there are a lot in debating community, a lot of female debaters exist, which is pretty strong. Which means and therefore they have to prove why the benevolent in of itself is a tipping point for women to reject the sexism as a whole. So they never told us, so this is completely not true. The second response is that you can utilize this kind of benevolent sexism as a whole, even if you cannot reject it. Things like the hey, women and traveling outside alone, people can think asking hey, this is okay. I think this kind of protectionism is rather better for women to avoiding the trouble, etc. The second point of response is the Deputy Prime Minister analysis. Hey, the bad attitude, a bad remark is checked, so this is okay. I think this is completely not true. I think, yes, why this is the case? Why bad attitudes or bad remark is not emerged in that clear way. Why is the case? As the Deputy Prime Minister told us, in the status quo, in the Reiwa era, we have so much check and balance system. Even if even the people with toxic masculinity, which is mature in the boys' school, have the tendency to think a woman is inherently inferior to men. I think they cannot say in that clear way because they get fired if they say so. So implication of this, they likely to move that hey, it's this apparently hey, this is okay. I'm not sexist, but actually they likely to promote men comparing to women. I think this kind of toxic masculinity that emerge in that way. This is not the predictive bias way. I take POI opening.
Okay, firstly, debaters are not average or reasonable. But secondly, more importantly, we tell you the only women who can speak up under this protectionist policy are likely to be those people who are powerful and have links to the powerful men who are going to rule the discourse. Why do poor people and a diverse range of women have the access to mainstream media, which my partner already told you?
So, okay, this is your burden to prove why in the narrative, without narrative, people who are in the most vulnerable condition can be better off in your side of the house. This is your burden to show why. So last part of my speech is why even if the influence of this narrative is pretty huge, pretty so even if we admit it, I think this narrative is much more better for women on the ground. At the time, this nuance is done, even if you cannot take or L or the nuance. That is, hey, other factor is really strong. Even if you admit this factor is really strong, I think that this is much more helpful. Why is the case? There are two steps I want to prove. The first step is that comparing the first two words. The second implication is the first, the comparative. The first in their side of the house, that they have to defend is that they have no obstacle. There are no people who believe in this kind of benevolent sexism, which means as an implication this the men, women, all the women have to are required to behave like a men. Things like the financial independence, the same curriculum to men or etc. But comparative in our side of the house, average men are likely to subside to benevolent sexism as a whole, which means things like the difference in curriculum, things like the tips for dating or things like way of thinking, parallel pain, physical abilities, things like muscle gain, or the way of thinking. I think these kind of differences is told in this by this narrative. The implication of this, the two things. The first, people can perceive differences in sex. For example, how it is the case, young women, they oftentimes see the 10 tips for dating, things like walking nearby the car side, or be kind to the cafe staff, or bring her back. All these kind of tips is prevail in the social media, and also in the financial people in the socioeconomical higher position. Also men, things like, hey, what is the way to advise to the female subordinate? So what is not sexual harassment? What is the female colleagues' needs? I think these kind of tips likely to prevail thanks to this narrative. Secondly, but people can incentive to take care. For example, but in our side of the house, this kind of action to taking care is required and encouraged, and people get praised by doing so, which means inherently women also can voice out. This is getting the entire OG nuance. I think in that metric we win. Happy to put.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition, for that speech. That concludes the opening half, and thank you thus far for speakers' cooperation in terms of speaking not too fast. Okay, with that said, let's invite closing government into this debate. So, member of government.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. Why women not succeed in the study? Even some women shows their excellence and the superior performance. There are strong backlash, and the men's and the study as a whole, they're trying to suppress the activities of such women. So women must keep the supporting job, such as secretary, assistants, and advisor, or just fighting job after marriage or having a baby. So the consequence of those benevolent sexism is a twofold. Firstly, the backlash to the excellent women, and also the disincentivize the women's motivation to success in the studies. So benevolent sexism is the greatest obstacle women to succeed. And two things from the member of government. Sorry. Firstly, the worst social structure is made by the benevolent sexism. And secondly, why non-benevolent sexism, such as the treating men and women equally, the non-benevolent sexism is better. But before that there are sub-framing. Firstly, on the CO's POI, the CO's POI says that actually, even in the status quo, the more companies takes the diverse policies,
and that maybe that some companies treat equally and men and women. Yeah, it is partially true, but we believe it is insufficient to deny the motions. The firstly, because even some companies that take some diversity policies, it is the only the target for the big company and only the target for well-educated women. So this is on. It covers only the partial women. And secondly, why those diversity policy is still small, because the benevolent section is still dominant. Therefore, the diversity policy cannot function well, because diversity and gender equality policies is contradicted with benevolent section. So in absence of the benevolent section, those diversity policies rather become dominant. Such as there's some holding company in the Google and the Microsoft. Also, all sides the systematic obstacle and other sexism exist in the society. That they say the lack of the access to social advancement for the women and the current lack of the quota system and the parental leave and etc. Firstly, DPM says the benevolent section that makes the brainwash to the women. Yeah, we agree to that. And moreover, actually, there are more structural reasons. The basis of the benevolent section, the women lose the motivation to the social advancement. For example, the company and the society that promotes this incentivize to the women, such as the resigning the job after the marriage and resigning a job after having a baby or something like that. So even if women is not influenced for the brainwash, those social structure and the social norms that are based on the benevolent sexism actually this incentivize to the women. Okay, and next, what is the problem with the opening debate? The opening debate is the lack of the comparatives. So Oji said the benevolent sexism is a problematic, but we are not sure how the women is better in absence of the benevolent sexism, and also all explain the goodness of the benevolent sexism, but actually all have no comparison with the no benevolent sexism, such as that treat gender equally. So the equal treaty is an alternative to the benevolent sexism. So CG will prove this point. Then on the first point, okay. So on the first point, the what social norm is made by the benevolent sexism. So what is the message of the benevolent sexism? This is that women are vulnerable, therefore men need to protect women. So what benevolent sexism works for men. Firstly, it makes the men's duty to protect women, and secondly, so why men need to protect women. This is because the man is superior to the women. So women is weak and men is strong. So therefore, men have to protect the women. So which means the message of the benevolent sexism is rather intensify the norm that the man is superior to the women. So as a result, there are three consequences. So many people believe the man is superior to the women, and secondly, the men have a heavy burden compared with the women, such as overworking. And thirdly, and actually in the real social structure reflect those benevolent sections, such as the income and promotions. So men's income is much higher than the women, and also the men's promotion is much higher than the women's. So the problem with opposition bench is that the problem of the benevolent sexism is that there is a norm that the men is superior to the women. So opposition sides have to prove that even if we have those benevolent sexism, the man is superior to the women, how the women succeed to those benevolent sexism systems. Then before moving to the second point, I'll take a PY.
Opening, closing.
Opening.
So why is a strong woman who can suffer from the benevolent woman, benevolent sexism, is the most important actor in this debate?
Actually, as long as the benevolent sexism exists, many people believe that women is the weak, so therefore they are protected. So in those systems, the women lose the motivation to succeed. So they actually not only the strong women, but also the weak women is the target of this motion. And even the weak women, they lose motivations, the benevolent sexism. Then why non-benevolent sexism is better? So firstly, the women are to be protected, so women should not be superior to the men, and not should they be overbearing. So, but in the if we treat equally, the men and women are equal and equal competitions. So even the excellent women promoted, and there is no backlash. But in the current situations, that women have to be promoted. But if some strong women is promoted, that there is a backlash coming from the men, especially the weak men. So, but if we treat equally, those backlash will be mitigated, or those backlash will be disappear. And also, and finally, women's motivations. So women are protected on men, and even if they don't work, so they lose the motivation, and they lose the motivation to work hard. So they have a false recognition that the marrying the men with a higher income is a success for the women. Therefore, the benevolent sexism disincentivize women to succeed in the society. For those reasons, we strongly propose this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, member of government, for that speech. Let's invite member of opposition.
はい、聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえます。
おはようございます。POI は多分チャットみたいなので声でお願いします。My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Chair. 2 extensions coming from closing option today. First, I'm going to embody the active sexism coming from opening option because they just gave you an example and illustration, never had a logistic comparison to begin with. The second extension coming from closing option is going to be how these benevolent sexism actually benefits women in general, and that is going to be further embodies feminism agenda and pushes women's social progress. I think this is going to be a huge extension coming from closing option for the reason the entire nuance coming from government was like, well, like agenda is going to be deprived by women and going to lead their women's going to feel bad for that, and those kind of things. As long as closing option tells you, well, first, livelihood itself is going to be threatened in comparative that they need to defend. I think that's going to be huge extensions why we have even farther greater obstacle to begin with. But secondly, I want to tell you why this isn't actually obstacle to begin with. But before that civil clarification, first about check and balance system. I think opening government broadly gave you strong the nuances that strong men as controlling and the world, and they don't have an understanding of men to begin with. 2 responses. First, I think this is realistically untrue for the reason we are living in 2023. We have social progress in the Catholic movement. We have progress in the Muslim context as well. We have, for example, things like getting revolutionary changes in companies' representative and decision making process as well. Notice we have been granted with much more quarters. We have granted more understanding and pushes for corporate understanding how women should be treated and put in as long as in terms working condition to begin with. I think there has been 2 reasons behind that. First, I think the context that we need to talk about is it isn't the one opening government has gave out to. I think this is context where this benevolent sexism remarks happens. It's not that much concern that as always has portrayed for several reasons. First, I think they have those kind of people who behave those kind of like benevolent sexism way, like has a good intention as also has considered. I think this means those kind of people still have to some extent an understanding about what human right is, what should be people should be granted on top of, and even including men to begin with. I think that means they probably have to some extent an understanding of gender equality to begin with. But I think the nuance here is like the understanding what gender equality is, but I don't know how to. I think this is a nuance that we need to talk about. That means the context that we need to settle down is not a liberal based one. I think that's in that sense also fails in that way. That means that also probably means men are not that much stupid. They're probably aware of things like cancel culture or social media existence. Especially if you are responsible, say in the corporate, those kind of like religious organizations to begin with. I think this has enough ability for two reasons. First, those kind of social media, cancel culture, all these kind of things threaten your and men's authority that on a daily basis, because it covers it covers their failure on a daily basis and spread worldwide and going to be spread quickly. I think things like the BBC, those kind of things can also threaten those kind of things to begin with. But secondly, I think there has been enough room for you to correct the sexual those kind of benevolent sexism behavior reasons like those kind of like I think that given the context, given the context, there is like it is not like things like fucking conservative echo chamber system. Rather, you have you have access to like much more liberal friends as well as conservative friends. I think that's going to be used. That also enables you to aggregate those kind of things. Got to have much more balanced point of view. But two reasons here. I think the women's agency are going to be much more guaranteed alongside the house. But so for the reason I have clarified, I think our opposition is going to be further embody this argument in response to opening government. Having clarified, moving on to moving on to the active sexism, what active sexism looks like. Not opening opposition just told you, well, they want to have inferiority on the basis with restriction. Closing opposition is going to be further embody this argument as a comparison on the logic level. No, the active sexism and the benevolent sexism are difference not thank you yet. The difference lies here is in the hostility. Easy, we're talking about things like Afghanistan, where female vigilante has been actively attacking and killing and causing massive massacre, those kind of things. That probably means three things. First, those kind of people living in comparative active sexism has an incentives like deprives lives itself. I think that's going to be further threatens men to begin with. But secondly, I think they have a natural incentive to spontaneously go seek what women want and destroy it beforehand. For example, we had talking about things like prohibition to flee to other country, like before, those kind of destroying educational facilities beforehand, or those kind of banning access to the internet. That's going to be potentially helpful for women. Those kind of things. I think this is all these kind of things that happens backdoor in a comparative world. I think that's going to be further bigger obstacle to begin with. But lastly, I think the narrative that's going to be spreading on the comparative. It's like, for example, those kind of like women deserves all these kind of things. I think this is difference between those and benevolent sexism, because at least benevolent sexism guarantees that men has an opportunity that they need to be seeked. They need to be deserved to be better position. That's going to be they need to be they need to have human counsel way. I think that's the reason why we still. I think the comparativism further was obstacle. Clarify that, moving on to why benevolent itself also guarantees benefit. Thank you. No, opening government just told you the info slide tells you, well, it damages women. No, just info slide just explains to you that the given viewpoint of receiver, it looks damages. No, everything notice everything has is multi-dimensional. That means a certain harm can also bring benefit to some extent. I think you cannot frame out these arguments just by using those kind of info slide to begin with. I'm going to tell you why those kind of benefit actually is huger than those kind of harm brought by open government. I think we are talking about is like not just economic one, but also like, for example, things like maternity or parental leave, so like those kind of parental leave, those kind of things. But also, I think that's going to be much more that happens much more in much more nuanced way for structural reasons here. First, I think that's, as I've also clarified, I've already clarified the actor of this kind of benevolent sexism behavior is going to much more cater to those humanitarian way. But secondly, I think that we also told you the correction happens in the given check and balance system. But also, I think the consequence here is like those kind of things are not obstacle to begin with. I think those kind of like those kind of economic subsidization to wives in the Muslim contextualization do happens in a way. Therefore, I think this is important because those kind of given the context, those kind of women do not have a financial livelihood to buy themselves to begin with. I think in that sense, having financially stable husband to begin with, I think it also guarantees the lives to begin with. They can at least have afforded food on the table. I think that's the reason why the actual kind of benevolent section narrative actually puts the benefit and actual lives for this kind of women very proud to pose.
Okay, thank you, member of opposition, for that speech. Just another gentle reminder about TOI engagements, especially in the diagonal exchange. Okay, with that said, let's invite Government Whip.
Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, and then I'm gonna take a POI vocally. Okay, so I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Shiji beautifully points out that the harmful social norm and then social structure which are the greatest obstacle for women's success, and we clearly elaborate the comparative. The audits beautifully talk about the harm of this norm, and the crucial mistake is the not citing a comparative side. Why talking about the comparative is extremely important, and then why Shiji overrides the other team. So why is elaborating a clear comparative important? So because by analyzing a comparative word, that we can prove why the benevolent sexism is the greatest obstacle. That on this point, that Shiji clearly the one OG. And then I'm going to talk about the comparative word, and then more precisely. And then benevolent sexism that creates all of the negative perception, and which creates the unfair social norm for women's success and then social structure. Our first speaker clearly talk about how women's motivation eliminated. And then on the other hand, so without the benevolent sexism, more equal perspective towards men and women exist, especially women. And then with having that benevolent sexism, the women should be protected and men should protect women. And this is, and then so everybody believes it and the media glorify, this is a good thing. The based on this norm, all of the most important, based on this norm, firstly, most importantly, women's motivation will be eliminated. And then so why is it very harmful? Women always feel guilty about the success. So especially, after getting married, women always feel guilty, so not taking care of their husband, not taking care of their kids enoughly. So if they keep working. And then also it creates a backlash. If women can be a top leader, or women can be politicians, everybody criticizes about the women, and then there are so many gossip and then toward women's success. This kind of thing, very harmfully in the status quo, the majority women give up their success because of this social norm and then this kind of the backlash. And then, however, in comparative, without not having the benevolent sexism, women don't have to feel guilty about their success. So they don't have to take care of, they don't have to care about the social norm. So what other people feel or think of the women's success, that they can keep working and then without worrying. And then if they promote earlier than male, so they don't have to care about what other people think. And then actually they can manage and then they can lead the whole group the better way. However, because having a backlash that women have to care about everything, and then that they can many of them the give up their success. That is why proving this comparative is very important, and then so we can prove the likelihood, and then why this is the greatest obstacle. On this point, so we override OG, and then actually OO and then CG and then OO, and then so they talked about and mainly they talk about the other obstacles and then the other lack of the system, and then however all of this structure that creates created by benevolent sexism. So actually that is why they talked about the other sexism or lack of system, but this is without the benevolent sexism, everything is better, and then actually more friendly, the women-friendly environment and then women-friendly system that will be created, and then this kind of the other sexism is based on the benevolent sexism. So everything, every the system and then the other sexism that will be weakened. So without having the benevolent sexism. And then they also talked about the women can reject the benevolent sexism, and however this is only actually some women that can reject the benevolent sexism, but this is minority women who are very strong. That actually the majority women and then the weak women can't do that. So that is why we override the OO, and then lastly lastly Shio and then Shiji. However, they talked about with having a narrative, women can have a better position now, and then benevolent sexism is the good way. However, actually, and unfortunately, what she said is out of debate, because as we already proved that because of the having a benevolent sexism, all of the negative backlash and all of the negative social norms are created, and then we also compare the both of the word, and then actually what does CO she is the argument doesn't stand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that speech. And finally, let's invite opposition whip to close this debate.
Okay. Hi, am I audible as well as visible?
Yep.
Thank you. I'll welcome PI on chat. Starts in a second. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, engage with closing government. Second, to opening governments, and then vertical comparison against all. The first, let's engage with the closing governments. Closing government says benevolent sexism perpetuates the notion that women are inferior. Therefore, they are more likely to stay in home, and their burden likely to increase as a result. I have a couple of responses to this. The first thing that I want to note is how benevolent sexism contributes to the problem that they identify. I want to note that the active sexism creates similar problem, or they are the most cause of the primary cause of this problem. Active sexism means the notion that women are inferior, women are incompetent, as opening opposition reasonably points out. Note, even if benevolent sexism has similar notions, the active sexism explicitly tells these kind of notions to the women. For example, there is a husband within the domestic environment that these women are constantly kind of doing a mansplaining to the wife, you are incompetent, therefore you can't work in the society, these sort of things to begin with. Therefore, I don't see to what degree their analysis of their problem is very relevant to this particular debate to begin with. But second, I want to know, I'm going to flip this. Benevolent sexism oftentimes mitigates gender equality or the discriminative notions that the closing governments identify. Note that the benevolent sexism, implicit nuance that the benevolent sexism has is a woman deserves protection. Women deserve some personhood. Women are a personality who should be respected, therefore they should be protected. In comparative to this, active sexism see women as a means to end. For example, they are baby factory. For example, women are the means to end in order to kind of relieve the sexual stress, sexual relief, for example. Therefore, women are more likely to inferior to the active sexism. Benevolent sexism at least to make sure that women are still respected as a person, even the ways in which they're gonna treat it is something a little bit some problems. Therefore, I don't see benevolent sexism is so very bad to begin with. But next thing that I want to have, but thirdly, the closing government's extension is largely derivative to opening government's claim that the benevolent sexism is harder to refute. Therefore, I don't see why closing government extension is very important within this particular debate. Let's engage with the opening government. This will also respond to the closing government as well. The first thing that the opening government explains is that the benevolent sexism is hard to overcome. This is an obstacle that is hard to overcome. I gotta, firstly, I don't see whether this is very true or not to begin with, right? The firstly, that is factually false. In the most large corporations, we have an increasing trend to combat this particular benevolent sexism. It is a little bit insecure for these people to not to listen to them. Sorry, give me a minute. There's a kind of noise around me. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, the issue has solved. I'm gonna resume in with the car withちょっとこれ少し静かにしていただけるとごめんなさい。But second, I'm gonna resume my speech in 3, 2, 1. But second claim opening government has is that the benevolent sexism is hard to overcome because that is implicit and women are more likely hesitant in refuting this. I don't think that is true. There's an increasing trend in the political correctness. There's an increasing social cancel culture that the respecting women should be based on the perception that women gonna have. For example, in the drama, for example, in the instances where Hoshinogen tells Hirose Suzu that I want to protect you, then Hirose Suzu have a perception that they have a benevolent sexism and this is something very bad and they have a huge question. This kind of illustration is increasingly emerging in the contemporary media and more consumers opt into this. That's why this particular drama, Iida Nigehaji, becomes so popular within Japan, for example. As such, there's increasing feminism and feminists treat this particular benevolent sexism as well because the notion that women should be protected, it is seen as something problematic even in the current context to begin with. Therefore, we think that the notion that we can't refute this is factually false and that is unlikely, and a member of opposition always provides structural analysis as to why this is likely to be refuted and likely to be scrutinized in the increasing trend of political correctness emerging in the status quo. Therefore, all this analysis is false. I'm going to flip the case from the opening governments. Note the active sexism is much more harder to refute. The key difference is hostility a member of opposition told you. In the instances of active sexism, it comes with hostility or a specific discriminatory view toward women. For example, women are the means to an end. Women are the ones who deserve some kind of sexual harassment, for example, because they are the ones who are going to be comparatively inferior compared with the other males, for example. In those instances, first, women on the ground more likely to have fear in combating or refuting this idea to begin with, because male become hostile to those people, as opposed to the benevolent sexism, in which at least men try to treat women as a kind of respected person, for example. Therefore, women on the ground have much more motivation to refute this in our side of the house, right? But secondly, through the active sexism, often does male benefits. For example, they can harass women, and they can make sure that I'm a still good person, or they can get some sexual desire, for example. Therefore, degree of backlash when refuting the actual active sexism is much larger compared with the backlash that we're gonna get in the kind of benevolent sexism to begin with. Therefore, in conclusion here is that the benevolent sexism is not the one that is difficult to kind of overcome to begin with. There's an increasing trend to overcome those instances. In comparison to this, active sexism perpetuates even now. We see so many gender violences, domestic sphere, for example, even in the back door of the corporations, for example. We see so many sexual scandals in the status quo, but this is continue to be emerging in the status quo because this happens beyond the back door, beyond the check and balance system the opening government wants to protect. Therefore, that we think that this problem is much more harder to solve. For these reasons, I don't think this particular analysis is very comparative. Given this, I'm gonna have a most critical analysis. So which is more important for us to solve? Which is larger obstacle? Opening government says, opening opposition only says active sexism. So sorry, I can't take you. Sorry. The opening opposition says active sexism can be worse than the benevolent sexism, but they don't never provide a structural, logical reason as to why this is true. Member of opposition debunk this particular deadlock by proving or identifying a crucial difference that this sexism has. That is the existence of the hostility. In instances of active sexism, that comes with hostility. Therefore, women are likely to less confident and more like have trauma and fear toward a male. That's the moment where opposing the male would be increasingly difficult. In comparison to this, benevolent sexism is much more easier for women to oppose to begin with, because women can be still confident about themselves because they feel like their personality is still respected. Therefore, it's much more easier for them to have a conversation to this particular issue to begin with. The last contribution that is never refuted by the closing governments is the notion that the benevolent sexism mitigate lots of issues that women are facing in the status quo. For example, women are locked out of the societal support structure in the status quo. That this benevolent sexism allows women to stay in a husband, at least they can have a minimum economic stability. This is a prerequisite to go against any problem for these reasons posed.
Okay, thank you, Opposition Whip, for that speech, and thank you all debaters for a wonderful round. Okay.